At California Closets, we design for the little things. Take this moment of a woman getting dressed for an early meeting while her husband's still asleep. Sorry. And now, the California Closets version of that moment, featuring custom soft close drawers. Bedroom and home storage solutions by designers who get you. California Closets, more room for what matters.
Hey there, everyone, and welcome back to Real Estate Real and Unscripted with Nicole Miller. Thank you all for joining me here again today. I am doing part 2 to the show from last week that was related to condos and what buyers should be considering when they are looking to purchase a condo. Today's episode, we're going to talk about the side of the seller. And as a seller in the condo market now, or even just a homeowner who owns a condo, what are some things that you should know? What are things that you should know about what's happening with the market? What are things with respect to expectations you should have? I like to tell people that we're not in Kansas anymore. And so things have changed, and drastically so in the Florida condo market, as many have seen. I have been selling condos since 2016, anywhere from 20 to 30 of them a year. I have a lot of experience in that space, and I've seen the different markets and how they all have just, evolved right now. And so, yes, we hear a lot of things out there, a lot of controversy about these condos, a lot of things about like pricing having dropped and, what's happened. I had someone call yesterday, asking me what happened. The condo, they bought 4 or 5 years ago, and the values have gone down tremendously. So, what's happening, right? So, we have sellers that are frustrated that, they have multiple showings and no offers, or maybe you don't even have many showings. Owners are shocked when buyers are asking for all of these things, documents, the engineering reports. The expectations are very different now. And you as a seller have to have a lot more prepared in order to get yourself ready for the market if you're going to be selling. And then as a homeowner as well, what should you really know about your community, what you should maybe do to help get involved. I'm going to share some things as well with respect to that, to make sure that your community kind of stays in a good position as some of these condo financing rules, laws, guidelines, are changing from, a lending perspective. So, the reality is that selling a condo today is very different than what it was a few years ago. And the buyers aren't just evaluating your home and what it looks like. They're evaluating the association, your building, its financial future. So today I want to walk you through what every condo owner should know before they're putting their property on the market, and what any condo member should know if you just, are a condo owner. So, selling a condo today is different than it used to be. I'd say in our Florida market, since end of 2022, we have seen a drastic change. And a lot of things that didn't exist before started to become commonplace. Buyers are more educated. They're more discerning. So what happened, right? We had a tower, a condo building that unfortunately, it was such a horrible tragedy, collapsed. And prior to legislation that was passed in 2022 requiring that buildings will have fully funded reserves and milestone inspection work has to be done, certain things about that we'll talk about more in detail. But beforehand, as a condo association, you guys all out there had the ability to vote for reserves or not, right? So you were able to waive the ability to collect full reserves, have it fully funded if you did, if it got voted on, right? And that had the option available. That got got thrown away when all this happened and Senate Bill 4D came into place. That was no longer an option. So they took away that power. And I guess you could say in essence, like, hey, we gave you that option, but it's kind of negligent because the boards are not making the right decisions and we're putting ourselves in positions where we don't have any money. So like I said on my last show, you cannot just assume that a building is going to continue. It's organic matter. Things deteriorate. So if you're working on a skeletal operating budget, your maintenance fee back then was $250, $350. There's no room for reserves. If a roof has to be changed out every 20 years, if concrete work has to be done every 10 years, if the pool has to be redone, if the paving has to be redone, if the, chiller tower in the building, there's so many components, everything, right? Everything that is part of it. The parking garage, there's just so many things that are involved in maintaining a structure. If that all has to be done in a certain time frame, where is that money coming from? So now what we're going to be seeing, and as of August, Monday, we had basically a change. And the financing requirements changed, Fannie and Freddie requirements for condos across the board. So as a homeowner as a condo owner, financing it changed during, after the crash. And basically in Florida, it was that if you could not pass a full condo review with a lot of questions about your condo, that is filled out by management, that is sent from the lender to them, that they charge the buyer to do, and then they give it back to the lender, and then the lender looks it over and checks things and then sends it back because half the time it's wrong and things are missing. Basically that used to be a full review. And if you were putting less than 25% down, your buyer would have to have this full review done of the condo. It did not matter if the buyer qualified. It did not matter if your building, if the buyer got approved by the association. It mattered that the lender checked out this building and that it met certain criteria so that the lender was okay with it financing under 25%. Why? Because that 25% is kind of their buffer as a byproduct of like, all right, if the market crashes, if they overpaid for this place, at least our interest in it is not going to be as upside down. And they want to put, more of it to the buyer. If the property could pass that full review, then a buyer could put down within their qualifying abilities, and they have to qualify for this as well, as low as 3%. On a condo, just like they could on any other home. And that's 3% conventional, not to be confused with FHA. Most condos in Florida, for other reasons that we've discussed on previous shows, don't fly through FHA, but that's for another episode. But so basically, if the condo could not have all their ducks in a row and they failed a full review, at that point, that lender was not entertaining it at all. At that point, if they were going to put 25% down, it wasn't going to matter. They needed to change lenders because now they kind of already saw it. But if you knew certain things about the condo, like if the condo did not have 10% reserves on their budget, that was a really easy, quick litmus test. Let's see the budget. Oh, they're taking in $1 million in income and their reserves are $15,000. That is not 10%. So guess what? This condo cannot undergo a full review. So that was an automatic advertisement by a competent realtor who knew what they were doing that would say, condo does not have fully funded reserves. Forget fully funded. Condo does not have the 10% reserve requirement. It needs to go 25% or more. So if they were putting 25% down, it was a limited review. And that limited review was a lot easier to pass. And it also didn't mean that, the buyers shouldn't know the answers to the other questions if they would make the difference in their purchasing the property or not. But the lender was not as concerned, right? So if you were buying a condo, you got a limited review, you should know that your condo wasn't collecting reserves in 10%. And 10% was an arbitrary number. And I talked about that last time, but you should at least know what you're getting into. But from a lender standpoint, hey, buyer, you want to put 25% down. We are good with that risk assessment that, worst case, the property is going to go down. Let's say you default or you have to sell. We're not going to be as upside down. You have some sweat, you have some money in the game. We have some money in the game. And it kind of mitigated their risk. So as of August, this week, there is no more limited reviews. That's huge. And where it's going to be huge and a big problem for some of these condos are the condos you don't think are condos. Because when people are like, what do you mean? That's a villa. That's one story. That's not a condo. Well, by their structure and what they, originally incorporated under and their docs, they're considered a condominium. So if you have a building and you can check it in tax record, there's ways to look at and see how it's coded. 01, 04, the different codes of the different properties tell you what it is, single family or condo. In certain counties, you have letters. If in Broward County, you have letters in your folio number, it's a condo. So if it's a condo and it's now there is no more limited reviews, if that condo does not pass a full review, you cannot finance your property. Think about that. That's huge. So one thing that I urge sellers and I urge property managers out there to get ahead of is to get a full review of the building. Get in touch with a lender, have them run a full review of your condo to figure out where you are lacking. Because if you cannot pass a full review, your sellers cannot sell with conventional standard Fannie Freddie financing. They are now going into other territories, which are non-qualified mortgages, non-QM, different types of things that, to be honest, a lot of these investors have also adopted some of these things. Like even post-Surfside, a lot of the non-QM lenders started to look at roofs and look at structural and look at reserves. I had a few of them and I'm like, oh my God, we just did this like 2 years ago. No one cared. And then next thing they know, they were asking us for an inspection of a roof in a condo in Boca. And this was a non-QM lender. So people are not just giving money away. They want to make sure that their investment is sound, especially with what we've seen in the past in history, right? You got to be smart. So as a seller and as a homeowner in a condo association, I urge you, and if you are a board member or property manager that's, listening to this, get ahead of it. Check and make sure. And also, yes, while we're looking at post-Surfside Senate Bill 4D, your condo now is required 3 stories or more to have fully funded structural integrity reserves. That number, for the most part, for many buildings that I've read so far, is kind of in the nature of the next part of what I'm getting at so the reserve requirement was always 10%. As of January of this coming year, and January because it's giving the buildings the opportunity to do this, it's giving you guys the opportunity to fix your budget and make sure that you put yourself in a position that you're not going to screw over your owners. The change is now requiring a 15% reserve. This is going to mutilate the condos that are not under the purview of the Senate Bill 4D, because a lot of the buildings that are 3 stories or more have to follow this fully funded structural integrity reserve study. That means that for the most part, from what I've seen, to be fully funded, you're shaking around 15 to 20%. I have a lot of buildings I've reviewed, but there are some that don't need to be at 15% to be fully funded. So if you are at 13 or 14% or 10% and you're considered fully funded per SERS and you check that box off and you're like, yeah, I made it. We're good. We did what Senate Bill 4D required us to do. You will not be able to get financing through conventional methods now, because as of January, as of this week, you no longer, like I said, there's no longer limited reviews, which means there's no longer the option for the budget and the reserves to not be on the review. Now they are. Now it is all full reviews. So now it is 10%. Some lenders are now going to start using the 15% because a lot of them start doing things in advance. But as of January, full review of the condo, and it needs to be 15% of your budget. So if you are taking in $1 million, simple, back of the envelope, you're taking in $1 million, there better be $150,000 going to reserves of some sort. If you're taking $1 million and you're at 100, 110, 120, you probably might still be at 15%. There are ways and numbers that they remove from the budget, pass-throughs effectively is I think what they're called. And so like if the condo collects for water, trash, sewer, or cable, things like that, that you as a homeowner would be paying for separately outside of a condo circumstance, that's removed. And then the numbers are calculated against the number of when those items were removed. And then that percentage comes from there. So important, super, super important that now the lenders are going to have stricter guidelines. And if your condominium doesn't check all these boxes off, your owners and your values will plummet. And I will put myself out there saying that if we think it's already bad, it's going to get worse. So they're giving everyone the time to get ahead of this to make sure that they can pass a full review. So get with a lender, go through your stuff, check and see, have them submit the full review, have a lender review it and make sure, is your insurance sufficient? Do you have crime coverage that's sufficient for a lender? There's a lot of questions involved in that. And if that's lacking, you cannot finance. So now you've dwindled your pool of buyers to cash buyers. It's not going to end well. So that's one thing I'm stressing super, super strongly to everyone to please keep that in mind and get involved and try to get ahead of this because it's not going to be pretty. It's going to make things even worse. And if we think Surfside's Senate bill, hurt us, it's only going to get worse. So please get ahead of that. The associations are now under greater scrutiny. The building itself plays a much larger role in the sale. So you may own the most beautiful unit in that building. It's been renovated. You did all the right things and it's way more than your kitchen countertops these days and the view. So making sure that your building has their ducks in order. Like I said in my last show, you own a portion of the condo. You all are owners of this shared entity. It's not just your unit. So buyers aren't just buying your unit. It's, this is really about the whole picture. Your association, their financial stability, reserve funding, insurance, deferred maintenance, milestone inspections, reserve studies, pending litigation, upcoming repairs. All of these things are factoring in to your equation. Just like when someone buys a single family home, it's the same thing. They're buying into this master association and you're not paying for it onesie twosie as an individual owner. You're paying for it and you're giving your rights to like a board to do these things on your behalf. So board members out there, get ahead of these things. Make sure, and that's the difference between the condos that are going to be in good shape and the ones that, that their prices may not have gone down that much and the ones that really plummeted. We have buildings, units that were selling for $220,000 in the height that are now at the $70,000, $80,000 mark. I have listings that, people have come to me and they bought it at the height and now they are literally, half the value of what they purchased it for. It's because a lot of these things, when you don't have as much demand and if the condo can't finance and there's problems from that respect, or if you have work that's being done and there's issues or there's any kind of liens from the city, any kind of code violations, magistrate liens that pop up, all these things are going to hurt you. So when your association's not following up accordingly, I had a condo in Margate. They could not sell for like a year and a half because someone dropped the ball on their 40-year milestone work. And then 2 years later again, I discovered that they had code violations that turned into special magistrate liens. And guess what? When you have a lien on the condo, once it becomes a lien, good luck. That's a title issue. Guess what? I helped them close the lien after they fought with me telling me I was wrong. So those things are very important to stay on top of and make sure that all those ducks are followed up on and closed out. You might say, why are some of these beautiful condos sitting? There's a lot of inventory, unfortunately, and a byproduct of that inventory is the fact that maintenance fees have gone up. A lot of them have gone up to the point where people can't afford it. And in certain communities, like the 55 plus communities, those 55 plus condo communities have taken the highest hit from what I've seen in terms of the pricing differential and the reductions that have happened as a result. So, you have situations too. So very important as a seller. When you get your property ready to list, it's not just signing the listing agreement with your agent. And if it is just signing the listing agreement with your agent, then I challenge that. And here's why. Hold on, I need a drink. As of the new updates and the laws that were put in place, your buyer has the right to review documents. They have 10 business days to review everything that you can think of for this building. Your milestone inspection, your SIRS report, the minutes of your board, the minutes, meetings, and agendas of the board meetings, of the member meetings, the deck, all of that is standard stuff that we were doing before the declaration, the rules, the bylaws, the questions and answers. Some of your communities don't even have all these things put together, but the buyers now have that right and timeline in their contract. They could void it. They could check it off and say they have already, but it's there and it's not being checked off. And so that automatically buys them a 10 business day inspection period. So everyone's all caught up. I have condos where the agents, I'll make an offer and the agents are like, 10-day inspection is way too much. And I'm like, okay, but do you not realize that we have the condo inspection period? I got 10 business days on that one, and we're running about 13 calendar days at this point today. So my 10-day inspection of the property is a moot point because I could literally back my client out of this deal strictly off the fact that you didn't get me the documents. So agents and sellers out there, when you are taking that listing, part of the condo listing process is not just getting it ready, determining a price, signing your listing documents, and then going forward. That agent needs to get all of these documents. There is a sheet. There is also a form that the Miami Board of Realtors put together. We have a whole email that goes out to us, which is really nice when we list a condo and they send you hey, FYI, here's what you should do when you're listing this condo. Here are the forms you need. And there are forms too that are official record requests forms that I have my sellers sign and we submit it to the association, and some of them fight us and then some of them don't, and we'll get them eventually. Some of them we won't get them and we're going back and forth. But if we don't get them and the buyer doesn't acknowledge that they're good with it and they have accepted the documents and they've timestamped the date of the acceptance of all their documents, they can back out up until the day of closing. So I will give you an example. I had a buyer under contract for a villa condo several months ago, and we did a ton of due diligence. So my due diligence on the buyer's side is now, and I've learned this over the years, everything's kind of stacked up. Like I said, a lot of the things I do now, I didn't do 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. I've it's come to us and I've added and layered, but I will check the county court records. I will check the county public records. We will look and Google the association. We will do all sorts of things to make sure we're not missing anything. So the community had a couple of things, a couple of lawsuits. We were given explanations of what it was. The buyer was okay with that, and it made sense, and the risk was assessed on their end. But nowhere ever did we see anything that would have lent to this. So we did all the research, inspection period. We went through all of the things. I was asking for the documents over and over and over. The community has a master and a sub main association and a sub association. All those documents for both are required. The documents were never prepared in advance for us by the listing agent. They didn't have them. So here we are, 2 weeks into the deal, asking for these documents again. Hey, we don't have XYZ, we don't have the budget, we don't have this. Can you please send us everything for the association and the sub? Can you please send us everything? We're working on it. So just to kind of lay this out, the inspection period ended already, but we still didn't get the documents. The buyer had the right to review those documents, 10 business days worth of days to review these documents once they have acknowledged receipt of the documents, which we never got. Guess what happened in week 2 or 3 of our deal? I was online and I was on Facebook and I saw an article with a picture of a condo that looked like it was from the West Coast. And I was like, oh, it's West Coast, whatever. And I said, you know what? Let me read it. And lo and behold, it was the master association for my client's condo that they were about to buy. And they filed bankruptcy. And we got out of it because we got out of it under the premise that we did not get the documents. We were not able to review the documents. So that extended their inspection period to almost 3 weeks. So don't do yourself a disservice. Those documents need to be had and conveyed. And they're usually, with myself and my team, they're conveyed immediately when we return the offer. Pending I got them all, and I'm not fighting and going back and forth, but they're usually returned with the receipt form when I have the offer returned and the seller signed the offer, so that we get it back and it's acknowledged and the timeline starts from there and not from 2 or 3 or 4 weeks from there. That right to back out ends the day of closing. So if the day of closing you wanted to utilize that, and I am not an attorney, I'm not giving legal advice. I am sharing what is black and white that you can read in the contract, that the buyer has the right to back out and void the contract within that period, the same way as I could void the contract during the inspection period for any reason under the sun. So please make sure that you are helping your agent get these documents. If you have a portal in your association, that's even better. You'll be able to see everything nicely organized, and you can get all those documents and send them over. You could look at the checklist of what's required and then put that in a folder. Dropbox is what I use. I send them the link so that they have them and they have everything, and they can't, and then they sign that they acknowledge that they received them, and then their time counts down from there. So make sure that you're doing that. And on the buyer side, they may not know what they're reading, and it's a lot, don't get me wrong. And your realtor should not be giving you like advice about it either. Some of the stuff is legal, some of the stuff could be construction related. So it's really important that you take the time, review it, do your due diligence, and they're doing that, sellers. They are, and they should be. So you're not just competing against the guy down the street, down the hall from you. You're competing against your building, and you're basically like putting yourself in a position where they are dictating your attractiveness, I guess you could say. So that's important. And one thing I think is going to be really important is that this 15% reserve requirement for buildings that are not subject and required to the legislation of Senate Bill 4D and the requirement for the fully funded structural integrity reserves. So if you own a condo that is not that tall and does not fall under that requirement, and don't get me wrong, a lot of these condos, as a result of everything that happened, I've had a lot of condos where I've seen that they were like, I'm sure they were like, right? Because then I see their budgets were changed year over year, right? And now they're reserving because guess what? They were like, oh, shoot. Wow, that really brought this all to light for us. We have a roof that needs to be redone in 6 years. How are we going to fund this? We have no money, right? And then, like I said, to take 6 years for a roof to pay it, or 2 years or 3 years to get a roof paid off is a lot more every month than if you've done it for the last 20 years. And that's the idea behind these reserve studies, to make sure that you're kind of saving up every year sufficiently so that when that item is due, you have the money. And you may not be on point. Obviously, it's an estimate. 20 years from now, things can get in. But then they are also sharing about doing those reserve studies more regularly to update them and check and make sure that we're still on track, right? But the goal is so that there's not a huge differential of what's owed. It's a lot better than having nothing, right? So, that is super, super important. And I think that if buildings do not get ahead of that in all those standpoints, you're going to have some issues. And so, during the due diligence period, the buyers are asking for all of these things. And you will make it so much easier for the transaction as the seller if we can get them these documents off the bat, complete with everything. It shows confidence. It shows that you guys have all your stuff together. It doesn't give people the time to be like, oh my God, why aren't they getting us the documents? They might not have them. Or, oh man, this building doesn't have their act together. Can you imagine what it looks like as a buyer? And imagine like my buyer, we're waiting for 3 weeks for documents. And what we're getting back from the other side is like, we're still getting it. We haven't heard back. The association isn't answering us. We've asked 4 times. Like, how bad does that look? And I'll tell you right now, a lot of your management companies are doing you guys a disservice. And I had one recently where I thought it was just me. And when I spoke to the president, they were like, oh my God, you were like the 5th realtor that called me. And I'm like, oh, good. It's not just me. And they're like, yeah, we're having issues. So it's very, very important to get ahead of this just from a perception standpoint. If people are not, if you're making it more difficult, it's not going to work in your favor. It's not. So what are some of the biggest mistakes condo sellers can make? Right now, I think a big thing that we're seeing is a lot of properties that are sitting on the market that are priced at numbers that are based on what existed years ago, back in the height of the market. You have properties that are listed at numbers that are similar to what they were going for in 21 and 22. A lot of, pricing based on emotion and not looking at what is really happening and what's selling. And so if you're sitting for months and months and months and months and there is no reduction, the market is rejecting you. There is nobody that's going to come and give you a price and tell you, I'm going to give you whatever you want. That's not where we're at now. And as far as, deciding if we sell now or wait, I've had people from the end of 23, 24, 25, 26, eventually they sold. And I said, it's going to start going down. And it's going to keep going down until it plateaus, in my opinion. So pricing with, emotions and not really realizing that the market is not where it was before is going to be your biggest, that's one of the biggest mistakes you can make. Look at what the market is selling, look at what yours looks like, and price it properly. Another mistake that sellers often make is assuming that renovations, solve everything, or thinking that you're going to get a certain price if we do some things, right? So a lot of times sellers will call me and I'll say, what renovations have you done? Have you redone the kitchen? Have you redone the bathrooms? What does the showers look like? And I'll be told we have new appliances. We redid the fans and the light fixtures. And yeah, I think the washing machine is pretty new. And I'm like, okay, so the kitchen. And so I guess where I'm getting at with this too is that the doing renovations also is not necessarily a positive. You have to remember too that you're going to be picking things you like. The buyer may not like them. You may now spend months of having to do all this work and the time and aggravation and managing people to get this done. So if you have a new unit that you renovated to live in and you enjoyed it and you got benefit from it, that's one thing. But I don't necessarily recommend going all out and doing a full renovation to an older unit. The differential in price is not going to make up for, in most cases, and don't get me wrong, is not going to make up for, especially in the condos and these price points, for the aggravation, the hassle, the time, and the cost that it's going to take to get it to that point. And so, pricing it accordingly as it stands based on like what the condition is of it, how much work the buyer's going to have to take on, acknowledging the fact that they are taking on that hassle and aggravation and pricing it properly. Every property can sell. It's all based on price. Mistake, like I said, waiting to get all your documents once you're under contract. Definitely want to make sure that you get that ahead of time. And then not understanding your association and the implications of things like the rules and restrictions. And so if you have an association that has layered on rules of they have a credit score requirement, they have an income requirement, you have to have everyone on the deed has to have this credit score, everyone on the deed has to have this income. You can't have, there's a lot of these communities that have, especially in the 55 plus space, that have a lot of these restrictions that cause your buyer pool to shrink. It's already difficult to begin with. Now you're attracting, now you're only available for sale to a much even more limited group of people based on all these requirements. And one thing I will say too that's super important is You have to make sure that your agent is well versed in the condo space. I was working with several agents in the last couple of years. When I spoke to them, they literally told me, I have never sold a condo. I didn't even know what you were talking about. Can you imagine that you hired that agent that said they never sold a condo? Can you imagine that you went to a doctor and they told you, I've never done this surgery. You're my first one? That's negligence. Honestly, I'm sorry. So you got to make sure that the agents that you are working with have experience in that category. There's, some agents specialize in this, some agents specialize in that. You have luxury, you have people, selling a house is very easy. Selling a house with no HOAs, beyond easy. Selling a condo gets much more difficult. You got to have a layer of expertise in knowing certain things. Selling a condo in a 55 plus community, even more layers on there. Having the experience and knowing what it takes is very important. So I would say that is probably one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen on the side of the buyer side when I'm working on this, where I'm helping them, or with situations where they don't realize that they needed to get the documents and they just lost their seller on a deal because they didn't do this in advance. So that's probably one of the biggest, mistakes I think people can make, is making sure that you get an idea of who you're working with and what they've sold and the breadth and depth of the knowledge that they have in that specific category. Not necessarily your neighborhood and that they had to have sold in your community, but what do they do to get what they need to get you properly, represented? What are they doing at the beginning of a transaction when you go under contract with them in the beginning? What are their steps to get all these documents? How are they communicating with the association? What is their plan? And it's not just their marketing plan. That's the whole point of my show, is it's not about the fla la-di-da, beautiful like sales marketing. That's all the same. The other stuff is, how is that agent protecting you and knowing all the nuances that are involved so that you have the best representation when it comes to this space that you're in. So I would just throwing that out there. Just ask for, experience, ask for sales history. You can see it on a lot of these public portals, shows, what they've sold before, but learn and make sure. It doesn't mean no one's a bad agent. It's just that if you don't have that experience in that space, it can hit you like a ton of bricks, and the liability behind it is not good either. So, you want to ask some questions. Is my building adequately funded? Are there pending assessments? Has the milestone inspection, the milestone inspection be complete, right? So one thing as a seller, you also have to understand is if your building was built, what year are we in now? 2026, right? So if your building was built in 1990, what does that make it? 36 years old. Great. So that means that it probably, that's not a good example. Let's say 2000. That's a better example. Let's say your building was built in 2000 and it's not by the coast. That means that in 4 years from now, you're going to have your first milestone. What if your building was built in 2005, right? There were a ton of buildings that were built in 2005, and let's say it was 3 miles from the coast. Well, we are now in 2026. That is 21 years. So while in our heads, 2005 seems like a really young building, guess what you're going to have in the next few years? Your first milestone at 25 years. So keep that in mind as well, because if you're on the precipice, I guess you could say, of an inspection, that's the problem too. Like if I have a buyer that's looking at that building, it's going to be tough, because if we're like, oh man, we have 2 years until the milestone, but what is the milestone going to bring you? Or as opposed to, we just did the milestone and everything is good. Everything's been paid for. It's been 2 or 3 years in our rear view. We're all done. The assessments are all paid for. That's a very different build to sell than we have a milestone that needs to be done in a few years, and it's going to be our first one, right? So keep that in mind as well. Is your building financeable? What concerns will the buyers likely have? What documents need to be gathered? Are there any upcoming projects? If you're undergoing projects as well, that's a tough one too. So lots of different things that come out of that. If you have an assessment that was already levied and the project's not done and they're in the middle of it, like I said in my last episode, we had one where they started the project and they realized as they were demolishing parts of the first building out of the 3, it was way worse than they thought it was supposed to be. And they were going to have have another assessment. And that was something that we would never have known if we didn't dig in as a buyer. So, assume, there's certain things as well. Like if it was notated and it's in your minutes and they're discussing it, that's going to be a consideration, right? If it's something that's been discussed, that's also something they're going to now see. So you can't really hide these things. What are certain things that you can do to prevent any surprises once you're under contract? So just making sure that you stay ahead of all of that. And, people think it's just painting, cleaning, staging. It's really not about outside of your building, but it is now. It's about your building and making sure that you are putting yourself in a position and helping your building maybe understand as well that they need to set themselves up and put some things in place to ensure that you maintain your values, keep the building strong, attractive, right? And help kind of leave this mess in a positive manner, because it has been a very, very rough few years. So, I think that hopefully that this was very helpful and, you guys out there were able to get some little nuggets. If you have any questions at all, if you're thinking about selling your condo, you're not sure where your building stands, if you have any questions about values in your condo, or you just want some advice, would love to be a resource, don't hesitate to reach out. There are a lot of agents out there that do specialize in that space. So I would recommend wherever you are to reach out to someone who has that ultra niche specialty and sells condos at a high level and understands all of those pieces so that you are best protected. And I really appreciate everyone joining me on this show. Look forward to seeing you on the next one. Have a great day.
It's 5 o'clock. Your employees are heading home. But you're still updating spreadsheets, switching between software, and wondering where the day went. There's a better way. Odoo brings accounting, sales, inventory, CRM, and more together in one fully integrated platform. So you spend less time managing software and more time running your business, because your workday should end eventually. Try Odoo free at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com.